understand the Electoral College, you have to go back to the underpinnings, which we'll touch on various aspects, one of which is very negative, and it's currently a very prominent part of the news these days. Mm. If you go back to the 1700s, late 1700s, you're talking about a country that is going to be the first country in the world to elect its leader, however it's elected. Every country in the world before that is either a monarch or is appointed in some way.
Yeah.
And so they're breaking the mold. And that's the reason they declared their independence from Great Britain, was because they didn't want to be under somebody's thumb that was just ruling because they were entitled to rule, or ruled by governors in the 13 colonies that were appointed by that person who was entitled to rule. And so they had a lot of debate about what they should do. Ideally, they did one. If you look, let me back up and say that, well, I'm not going to cite chapter and verse, but the comments that I'm making come from the Federalist Papers,
Gotcha.
the Anti-Federalist Papers, and the Constitution itself.
Okay.
So the legislative history.
Yeah.
So at the Constitutional Convention, they were trying to decide what was the best way to handle this, and they were creating something new. They thought that ideally the population would elect its own leaders. But at the time, they thought a couple of things. One, that the population as a whole was not in the know, so to speak, and not sophisticated enough for every single one of them to have their own vote. Mm-hmm. So that people that are, quote unquote, more knowledgeable about the process should be voting on their behalf. And so as a breaking point, that's probably one thing that's changed over time.
Yeah.
Is that arguably now, with all the information that's available, the electorate is not uninformed, or it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that they are informed, but they have the ability to be uninformed. They have the ability to be informed as opposed to not being informed. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily think, with all the social media and everything, that people do their own research and decide what the answer is or should be. A lot of people hop on to whatever someone else says, and I think that's the problem. If there's a drawback to the drawback, it's that people don't do their own research. They just believe what they're told. But people today have the ability to research and root out the final answer to make an informed decision. So that's a departure from 1789. Another aspect was, how do we account for the population? If they were going to decide on, and let me back up and say that ultimately what they decided is it was either Congress was going to decide who the president was, or the population was going to decide. Because they determined that the population was not sophisticated and informed enough to make that decision, it needed to be the Congress. Well, the conventioners decided through debate that if we're going to have three branches of government, a judicial, a legislative, and executive branch, that having the legislative branch decide the executive branch would also not kind of fit in with the checks and balances that the Constitution was intended to have. That the executive branch could be dictated to by the legislative branch if they wanted to be elected again. Sounds a lot like our corporate autocracy that we have right now.
Yeah.
But that's a whole other discussion. So they decided on that. So a set of people, it'd be some hybrid. It was the Virginia plan, the Jersey plan, but they decided on a hybrid of, there would be some people that were decided upon to decide for the population at large. Then the question was, how do we decide how many people there are and what state gets allocated how many electoral votes? And this is where we come to probably the most negative aspect of the Electoral College, is determining those people.
Yeah.
A state like Virginia, which had a large slave population, wanted every single one of those people to be counted, which is ironic. It's actually shameful because they didn't consider them people, but they wanted them counted for the purposes of the Electoral College.
Right.
I won't drop an F-bomb, but it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's fine, dude.
So it's fucking ridiculous.
Yeah, it is fucking ridiculous.
Obviously, the slave owners wanted to maintain some control, and it ultimately led to the Civil War.
Yeah.
But Virginia was the most powerful state in the country, and they wanted to maintain that power. We talked about that through the comments, that power is addicting, and corruption is partially there to maintain your power.
Right. Yep.
And that's what these guys wanted, Virginia in particular. So they agreed on the rule of 3/5. that each slave would be counted as 60% of a person, which I hate to even say out loud, but that's what they did.
Yeah.
And the 14th Amendment abolished that.
Yeah.
That every person would be counted as a whole person. And, the 13th Amendment, we know, abolished slavery. And the 14th Amendment, among other things, granted due process at the state level. And each person would be counted as a whole person.
Mm-hmm.
So that took a while. That took, 100 years to get there.
Yeah.
But they counted them as 3/5 of a person. And even with that, Virginia had 25% of the delegates that you needed to elect the president.
Wow.
So ultimately, 32 of the first 36 presidents were Virginia slave owners.
Oh yeah, I never put two and two together. So you had like you had Washington, Adams. Was he from Washington? But yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, bro.
No, I was just listening.
Yeah, I never put that together. Yeah, dude, basically the state of Virginia forged like the early years of the United States of America because of that.
It's arguable that the way it was set up was for them to maintain their control.
And Virginia was the most powerful state at that time too. So yeah, that does make sense.
But interestingly, 200 plus years later,
mm-hmm.
the most powerful state in terms of total electoral votes, which is approximately 20% of what you need
mm-hmm.
to win the presidency. We're talking about California right now.
Yeah.
Does not have that same power. So it's shifted over time.
Amazing.
So
yeah,
going back to the original aspects of the discussion, they decided Congress wasn't going to decide who the president was, except if the Electoral College failed. And the reason they came up with the compromise was that actually the conventioners thought that the Electoral College would fail
mm-hmm.
more often than not, and ultimately the Congress would decide. And so the people against Congress deciding who the president was going to be said, okay, you know what, that's fine. If it doesn't work, then we'll let Congress decide ultimately. Well, it's only happened twice, ever, and I believe the last time was in 1824.
Mm.
And the reason for that is, although George Washington was unanimously voted in his first election, and there's a supermajority approval in his second election, since then, there have been basically two parties. I mean, the parties have changed. The parties that were in existence have changed over time,
mm-hmm.
but there essentially have been two primary parties since 1800. And that basically did away with the ability of Congress to decide, because every election there's probably going to be a majority.
Yeah.
And there hasn't been. There's hypothetical situations today, for example, in which there could be a tie, and then Congress would decide.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very unlikely, and it's shown itself by the fact that we've never had the Congress elect a president since 1824.
Wow. This is a great conversation. I'm loving this, man. So
good.
So devil's advocate, getting rid of the Electoral College.
Well, going back to the core, if you're I guess a true constitutionalist,
yeah,
getting rid of the Electoral College would be because the popular vote was one of the foundations of our system of government. And that the reason we have the Electoral College is that the people were supposedly unsophisticated and uninformed at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's no longer the case, if people can, whether they do or not, if people can be informed
mm-hmm.
and they can be sophisticated voters,
mm-hmm.
then the basis for which the Electoral College was put in place is no longer practical. It's no longer the case. And I know that there was a bill that was passed, the interstate, I don't remember the name of it right now. It was the Interstate Compact.
Ah.
It was this national popular vote bill, which I think is kind of open-ended, and it would pass at some point if enough states passed it. I don't think that would hold up.
Yeah.
I think actually would be challenged as unconstitutional because it's contrary to to the Constitution of the United States.
Ah.
You can't circumvent the Constitution by a bill. And I'm pretty sure that if that passed, if it got enough states to pass, that it would be challenged. There would be a lawsuit and it would be enjoined because it was unconstitutional. Then it would go through litigation. It would ultimately end up at the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
And I believe that ultimately it would be determined that by the Supreme Court to be unconstitutional.
Yeah, because you have to have an amendment, not a bill, right?
You'd have to have an amendment, and the amendment is so. Even if going back to your devil's advocate,
yeah.
Even if the Electoral College is not what the founders intended,
mm-hmm.
based on the state of our society right now,
mm-hmm.
and given the slavery or aspects to it at the genesis of the Electoral College,
mm-hmm.
which I don't think the Electoral College is necessarily based on slavery, but there was definitely a component to how they calculated it. And as I said, ultimately Virginia, the first 36 terms of the presidency, 32 of them were Virginia slave owners. So clearly that had it was a factor in the outcome.
Yeah.
An amendment is very difficult to do. You have to have a national uprising, so to speak, because it takes a 2/3 vote of each house to propose the amendment. And practically speaking, could you imagine a situation in which both houses, 2/3 of them agreed on anything?
I mean, dude, will we ever see that again?
Probably not.
I mean, there's no way. There's not in this environment. I really don't see that happening for a long time.
Right. And then let's assume that 2/3 of each house got passed a proposed amendment, and they had their joinder conference, and they decided on a mutually agreeable proposal to submit to the states. Mm-hmm. Then 75% of the state legislatures would have to pass it, which is 38 states. Yeah. That's why I mentioned the Interstate Compact, is that 75% of the states haven't even passed a bill to change to the popular vote. And it's been going on for 4 years.
Wow.
And every amendment in history has passed usually within 6 months to 18 months.
Wow. And
so I just mentioned that earlier. And again, just to give you some idea of the likelihood of success, even if it made it through Congress.
Jeez Louise, man. So even if folks, are like, yeah, let's do it, the fact that it could actually happen is like, we're looking at like a 5% chance of happening.
I think 5% is generous.
Wow.
It's probably less than one. I mean, think about the last time there was an amendment.
Was 68?
I don't remember what year it was. The 27th Amendment was it?
Whew.
It's been a minute.
It's been a minute. That way. Yeah, it's been a while. Wow.
So and most of them, and there hasn't been obviously the first 10 amendments were right out of the gate, and they took a little while to pass, but and it still wasn't very long. It took time because of how spread out the population was, and the lack of ability to communicate.
Exactly. I was gonna say, they had to bring them by horse carriage down to the house.
Exactly. So that took some time.
Oh yeah. And
today we could do it. We could do it if we had it, the mechanisms. I mean, the mechanisms are in place to move quickly, which is part of the reason I feel like it may never happen, an amendment of any sort, because let's see. I'm looking up to see.
No, you're good.
1992.
92 was the last amendment?
I think that was the 27th Amendment.
Wow, gotcha.
I'm not 100% sure because I'm looking very quickly. But still, it's been a while. Even then, it's over almost 30 years.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that was a technical correction. And the 26th Amendment was the same kind of thing. It was a correction of the Electoral College process.
Gotcha.
Because in the initial, going back to the Electoral College, the initial electoral process was the top two candidates. Number one, the first person who finished first was the president. And the person who finished second was the vice president. Now, as we know, they run as a ticket.
Yeah.
So,
interesting.
And they had to change the amendments. It wasn't the 11th or 12th amendment was the one that changed the methodology of counting. And then the 26th amendment made a technical correction on that. So it wasn't easy. It wasn't difficult to pass because it just made sense, right? So now anything that has politics involved
mm-hmm.
is going to be difficult to get through. The 12th Amendment was the election of the president that they reformed the process of the Electoral College in terms of counting and for whom.
Amazing. Man, wow.
So you could argue that because of some aspect of racial underpinnings and the fact that the electorate is or could be informed and sophisticated,
mm-hmm.
that we could go to a popular vote.
Yeah.
That would be the reason to get rid of it. Is that, if you're choosing between Congress and the population, and they really wanted the population to vote for the president, but they thought they weren't able to, then we're past that.
Yeah, that's true.
I think another aspect they wanted, which is why I mentioned Virginia, is that they didn't want any corruption or any cabals, any dominating groups to control society. Which is what happened with Virginia. They ended up controlling the presidency for 9 elections.
Exactly. I was going to say, that's a little hypocritical, isn't it?
Right. But they also have to understand they didn't have the benefit of information velocity that we do now.
That's true.
And if they wanted some research done, they had to send a horse and carriage down to D.C. to get something done, and then take it back up to Philadelphia.
Whew.
So, anytime they needed right now, you have somebody sitting there at a desk with a computer that can look it up,
mm-hmm.
what you need. And every time they needed some additional information, they probably they needed to send a horse to go get it.
Amazing. Man. I bet when the telegraph came in, that was a big deal.
That helped. Right. Yeah, exactly.
Man.
And I think another aspect of the Electoral College is that I mentioned Virginia, they didn't want any one state to dominate
mm-hmm.
the electoral process, although Virginia did.
Yeah.
But the people who say that it's not fair, that the popular vote doesn't control the outcome, if you look at the 2016 election, if you take California out of it,
mm-hmm. Trump
won the popular election. So if you take one state that has 6 million vote swing the other way,
mm-hmm.
is that representative of the electoral process that we want?
Interesting.
That one big state can control the outcome. And I think part of the reason that they wanted, the reason we have 2 houses, and part of the reason for the Electoral College, the way they structured the Electoral College, if Congress wasn't going to vote
mm-hmm.
for the president, which is equal representation,
mm-hmm.
is that each state would get a hand in it, so there would be some representation in every state. Having said that, we know now that because of the way the Electoral College works, presidents pick and choose which states to go campaign, because the swing states are the ones that are important.
Precisely.
Everybody knows that New York and California are going to go Democrat, Texas,
mm-hmm.
and Florida are most likely going to go Republican.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's the Midwest states, in Virginia, North Carolina,
yep.
the states that have 10-ish electoral votes or more.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be the ones that are important, and those are the ones that people campaign.
Yep.
And I remember Trump coming to Texas frequently in 2016 because he knew he had that state in the bag.
He didn't know. Excuse me. He knew. He's
Great. And I think he got Texas by 2 million votes, 1.5 to 2 million votes.
Wow.
So it wasn't even close.
Yeah.
In real numbers. Percentage-wise, it might have looked close on paper, but in real numbers, we're talking about 1 million votes. That's a pretty big margin.
That's huge. Yeah.
Right.
Wow. Yeah, I kind of scoffed at people when they say, if we got rid of the Electoral College, that these candidates would be, they'll just go to where all the people are. When in my view, if we did get rid of the Electoral College, the state that an individual lives in or resides in would merely be a identifying factor rather than an actual vote for the state of, right? On a national level. So it almost makes the candidates have to play honest, right? Because there would be no swing states, right? You have to appeal to people or not.
Right.
Man.
And that might allow for a third candidate or fourth candidate.
That's what I would love.
Which could affect the outcome.
Exactly.
And if somehow somebody didn't get 270 electoral votes, then it would go to Congress.
Phew.
Actually, I take that back because we wouldn't have the Electoral College. What am I saying? It was just a national party. But you could have third or fourth party candidates affecting the outcome because they could take away from one of the other candidates. That's
true. Say, in that matter, and I'm going back to what you mentioned earlier about how it used to be in terms of first, second place. Could that still coincide with a popular vote type of atmosphere? It doesn't matter what party you're with; it's whether or not people vote.
Right.
I wonder if that would play out.
Woo! Could you imagine? Well, could you imagine if Hillary Clinton was president and Donald Trump was her vice president?
Holy Jesus!
Wow.
Yeah, we never get shit done for real. Oy. Well, I don't know.
That would take in a constitutional amendment as well.
Yes.
If we're gonna retain some part of the Electoral College, which would be counting the votes.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there is a way to adjust the Electoral College without an amendment, and that is each state would have to overhaul the method by which they elect the electors or appoint the electors. Excuse me.
Yeah.
So although the Constitution, its Article 2, Section 1, lays out the Electoral College, and incidentally, the largest portion of the Constitution, in terms of pages, is the discussion of the Electoral College.
Amazing. Yeah, they debated on that for a while.
Then they leave it to the states. They leave it to the states with respect to how the electors are appointed. And initially, they were appointed popular-ish, we'll call it, so that the electors had some free will. And over time, almost every state, and there are a couple of states that have electors that have some free will because of the superdelegates, but primarily, every state, most state laws state that the winner of the majority of the state automatically gets all the electoral votes. So if they overhaul those laws to allow for the Electoral College voters to vote percentage-wise, so let's say it's Iowa, and Iowa's 55-45, and they had 100 Electoral College votes. I know that's not the case, but if they did, then 55 of them would vote for Trump if he won Iowa, and 45 would vote for Clinton. But that way you would get some Electoral College votes from each state based on the popular vote of that state.
I like that.
And that could happen.
I like that.
Because each state would vote it by itself.
I like that. I mean, that makes sense. That's sensible. Interesting. Interesting. You gave me something to think about. I like that.
So that's more possible than any other approach. Now, what could happen with that is if, let's say, going back to Iowa, because I use that state as an example.
Sure.
They changed the law so that electors could vote would be allocated based on the popular vote in the state. There probably would be some litigation which said that it was unconstitutional, and it would tie it up. And that would be interesting to see how the Supreme Court came down on that, because I assume there would be multiple instances of litigation that would result in the Supreme Court. But it would only take one, because the argument would be that changing the electoral voting process in a state arises under state law or the Constitution, under federal law or the Constitution, because the Constitution allows the states to appoint their Electoral College voters. It would end up at the Supreme Court of the United States, and with 5 conservative justices. I don't know. It would be interesting to see how that turned out.
Yeah, it would be interesting.
And one of the justices is a true constitutionalist. Scalia was probably the leader in that regard at one point. But not anymore.
Interesting. Yeah, the Supreme Court's it's an interesting makeup there right now. And they're gonna be there for a while.
Most of them are fairly young. They could be there for a while. So that's not unusual.
No, it's not.
The presidents try to. I think Clarence Thomas and Ruth Ginsburg are the oldest two. Maybe Breyer. And then after that, the next 6, they're all pretty, in terms of Supreme Court justices, being in their 50s or early 60s, are fairly young.
That's young, yeah, absolutely. We're looking at a potential 2-3 decades, maybe even, depending.
I think the next ones who could step down would be Thomas or Ginsburg.
Yeah.
I believe that Ginsburg is the oldest.
Yeah.
And she's a widow, so that could be part of the reason she enjoys jurisprudence, and it keeps her busy and keeps her mind active. She was a Second Circuit Court of Appeals judge in New York. Her husband, Martin Ginsburg, was one of my professors at Georgetown.
Oh, really?
And when they moved to the DC area, his book had a foreword that said, "People ask me why I moved to the DC area after being a professor at Columbia for years, and I tell them that my wife got a pretty good job."
How humble.
Yeah.
That's funny.
For the team, strength and honor.
You know it. Are you married, Tony?
I am not.
I mean, it's not a knock, bro.
I was, but I am not.
Oh, I got you. Yeah, that's I'm on my second too, so it's all good.
I mean, it's possible there might be another. I'm not looking for it, obviously.
Don't.
I shouldn't say obviously, but I'm not looking for it, and there's no timeline. But if it happens, it happens.
If it happens, it happens. And those are the best ones, bro. Those are the best ones. Hell yeah, man. Those are the best ones. When you go looking for shit, that's when you get smacked in the face, you know.
Right. You can overlook red flags.
Yeah, exactly.
Which leads to them being an X.
Yeah. Bingo.
True, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's how it works, by God. Yeah.
It may take a few years to figure it out, but eventually it comes around.
It does. Yeah. The truth cannot be hidden. Cannot be.
Absolutely.
That's why I seek it. And that's why I got you on today.
Thank you. I guess that was the exception to not having content. Since you're having content, I think I'm probably the only person that doesn't have. But that's not necessarily by choice. Is that from what I see from the outside looking in, it takes a minute to draft and edit and compose those videos.
Yeah.
Even if it's 1 minute.
Yeah.
And for a first timer, it might take me a couple of hours to do one of those 1 minute videos, or even an hour to do 15 seconds.
Yeah.
And most days, if I have spare time between work and other obligations, that 1 hour I don't want to spend trying to figure out how to do a video.
I don't blame you. If I wasn't a content creator,
me, including you, people have encouraged me to do so. I just haven't yet.
Nah, don't worry about it, dude. Don't worry about it. And I should have been. I should have been. Yeah, I'm not worried. Don't worry about me. I'm not worried. I should have been. I should have been clearer. I should have said intellect is a necessity.
Oh yeah, right.
And that I can sense. And apparently I was right.
I could do it, and I could figure out how to record and edit and add music and filter or whatever. But right now, I just haven't endeavored to undertake the learning process.
Yeah, it's all good. From the sounds of your career, man, you got your hands full anyway.
It's pretty busy.
So yeah,
it wasn't during the lockdown. It slowed down a bunch during quarantine.
My bad.
But now that we're coming out and oil's stabilizing in the high 30s to 40s, which is, it's sad to say, stabilizing in the high 30s to 40s. Because 5 years ago it was 100. But it's better. And there are a lot of companies looking for value acquisitions. So that's what I have. The clients now are looking to take advantage of companies that maybe there's an older group of owners that don't want to manage through another down cycle, or they're just tired of the cyclical nature of being in the oil and gas business, and they just want to get out.
Right. And I'm assuming there's probably quite a few of those.
There are plenty. There's a lot of bankruptcies going on. You can buy assets and companies out of bankruptcy.
Oh man.
And then there are other companies that are just struggling, and part of it is because of the economic downturn due to the quarantine. People weren't flying, people weren't driving, people weren't traveling, and so fuel wasn't being used. If fuel's not going to be used, then we have the perfect storm, so to speak. I don't know if you recall a couple months ago, oil closed at -37.
Yeah, those prices were crazy.
How do you know? How could that? I mean, people were asking me, how is that possible? Well, there's a few reasons. One, you're not actually buying a barrel of oil.
Right.
those those numbers. What you're buying is the right to buy a barrel of oil. To make it as simple as possible. So what caused that wild swing is it was a Monday. I think it was May 18th or April 18th. It was April 18th. It was a Monday. And Tuesdays are when the hedges drop. So people that have hedged with the price support have to unload, or the hedges go away. They had to unload all their contracts to purchase oil. And the reason they wanted to do that is because there was no place to put oil. They stopped producing. There's no place to put it. There was an excess supply and no demand. Or demand was down 40%. So you put all those factors together, it created a hole in the ground.
Hell yeah.
And there was nowhere to go but down.
Oh my God. Oh my God. I've never heard numbers like that from the oil world. Never. Ever.
Never.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I cannot recall a time that it closed negative. I mean, it might have someone could hear this and say, "Oh, I remember in 1987." I was like, "Well, it was during the SNL crisis. I wasn't really paying attention to oil back then. I was counting my fingers."
Exactly. Wow. It's gonna be interesting to see the turnover in terms of assets and properties and all these other things being mixed around and bought up over the next 5 years. It's gonna be really interesting.
I agree. There's a lot of in any downturn like this, there's a lot of opportunity.
It's true.
True. In the one of the downturns, I think it was the 2008, 2009 real estate downturn and economic downturn. I think that's when Amazon really took off. And then the second one, there was one, the 2014, 15, 16 downturn, which was related to oil and gas. That's when places like Airbnb and Uber started rising out of the ashes, so to speak. And there will be other opportunities that come out of this.
That's true.
We just don't know what that is yet.
Yeah.
In addition to areas that are weak economically, and so real estate's going to be less expensive. There's going to be value stocks to be acquired. There are going to be value businesses to be acquired. One of my clients, their approach is now when things are down, we make money when we buy it, which doesn't make sense, except that eventually, whether it's 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 5 years, the economy will restore to where it was pre-COVID-19. And their point is, if we buy when it's -5 and it gets back to 0, we've just made 5.
That's right.
And if it goes above 0, then we're really in the money.
That's really
if we get back to quote unquote normal, we've made a bunch of money.
Yeah, buddy. That's why you need to have assets available, people.
Right.
You gotta have that stuff available. You will make money.
It takes money to make money.
Yes, sir. That's how it goes. Man. Oh, dude. This is a great conversation, Tony. I appreciate you, man.
Yeah, likewise. It's 45 minutes went by pretty quickly.
It did. That's why I was looking at my, holy shit, okay.
I feel like we could do this for a few hours. We could touch on a handful of subjects and be on for 3 hours like Joe Rogan.
Oh, dude. Oh, Joe. Yeah, we could. You're right. You seem to be pretty diverse in your experience in the world, man. That's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing.
There's I think wisdom comes from experience, and experience comes from making mistakes.
Well said.
Or participating in life, which includes the ups and downs. So yeah, I hear you. So if you'd like to do this again sometime, if we could keep going, if you need to wrap up, that's good. If you want to hit on some other topics at another time, I'm glad to do that as well.
Hell yeah, dude. We'll do that, man. I don't want to give everybody the goods at once.
Right, I hear you.
Yeah. So we'll do a part 2, man. Hey, Tony, I really appreciate you, man.
Yeah, Tim, it's great to talk to you in person. And I'll keep your number saved as the Duet Ninja, and I'll be on. You haven't seen the last or heard the last of me.
That's good news, bro. That's good news, man. I hope you get that. I hope you get out there and get some fishing done.
I hope so. The sun's coming out, so maybe this afternoon we will.
Woohoo!
Ninja warriors, the powers they hold are legendary.